I can't. I can't breathe. Relax. It ain't me. But these were the last words both Eric Garner and George Floyd said to the police before they died gasping for breath. What do you think these two men had in common? Only one thing: black skin. Now, even though allegedly racism has been legally abolished worldwide, it still penetrates our societies here and there. And that's why I decided to tackle the subject of racism in my thesis. So without more ado, let's see what this presentation has got for us. Here we can see the table of contents. First, I'm going to tackle the problem and then move on to point out the significance, and afterward the objectives of the study, and then the theories I used, and after that I'm going to show you the analytical data, and finally I'm going to conclude everything. So starting with the first of which, the problem. The research problem my paper investigates is the crucial link between racism and inferiority and superiority feelings. The blacks tend to have different inferiority feelings to those of the whites, and the presence of the white privilege is involved with that. Also, white race traitors contrast sharply with black race traitors in respect of superiority feelings, inferiority feelings, and goals. Thus, the significance of the study lies in the contribution the study will make to the critical analyses of the three literary works, Black Like Me, Small Island, and Blackass. The selected texts were never approached from an Orwellian perspective, nor were they tackled from an Adlerian perspective. Therefore, the study is to bridge that gap. Coming up to point out the objectives of the study. My paper has three objectives. The first objective is to illustrate how a certain race triggers either the sense of inferiority or superiority through the presence of the white skin privilege. Second, to present in what sense some of the characters are race traitors. And third, to explore how white and black characters deal with their own inferiorities and superiorities. Moving on now to the methodology section. One of the theoretical frameworks I use to analyze the literary text in the study is Adler's theory of individual psychology that is concerned mainly with the sense of inferiority and superiority. According to this theory, every human being has inferiorities that need to be overcome. But when there is a repetitive failure to overcome them, one reaches inferiority complex. And while one may gain superiority feelings when there is a successful compensation for certain inferiorities, one reaches superiority complex when there is an overcompensation. Now we need to understand where these inferiorities stem from. They stem from what Adler calls the tasks of life or the problems of life. We have the task of work, associated with having a rewarding job, the task of love and sex associated with having a soulmate that gratifies one's sexual desires, the task of friendship associated with having friendly relationships and collaboration with others, the task of self associated with self-success, the task of spirituality associated with finding the meaning of life, and finally, the task of family and parenting associated with having a kind of relationship with family members. Now, how can a person overcome them? It depends on the personality type that offers the necessary lifestyle to overcome one's problems or inferiorities. Adler offers 4 types of personalities: the dominant type, the leaning type, the avoidant type, and the social type. The dominant type personality is in a constant state of striving for control and manipulation and is susceptible to antisocial behavior. This type acts with no concern for others. Such a person is prone to become hostile, criminal, sadist, rapist, racist, you name it. And we have the leaning type personality that is selfish, antisocial, dependent on others, and such a person believes that other people will provide satisfaction in favor of the person themselves. According to Adler, this is the most common personality type among individuals. While the avoidant type is in a melancholic temperament, and the person with such a personality is afraid of defeat and rejection, and thus may gain success through no risky paths. Therefore, avoiding problems becomes apparent because the individual is afraid of any possible occurrence of failure. And finally, the social type. that is in a sanguine temperament, and as the name suggests, is a sociable individual who strives for their own good and causes no harm to the community, behaving according to the public needs. This is the healthiest personality type among the other personalities. Now, other concepts I use are taken from the critical race theory, race reason, and white privilege. Race reason, coined by Noel Ignatieff, signifies a situation wherein a certain individual, usually white, stands against their race members in order to abolish the white privilege. But people of color can also be labeled as race traitors when they are found acting in ways that are not deemed appropriate or loyal to their race. White privilege, on the other hand, coined by Peggy McIntosh, signifies the inherent advantages possessed by a white individual on the basis of their race in a society characterized by racial inequality and injustice. Now, to make things more clarified and less complicated, here's a chart that shows how the theories used interact with one another. We have the theory of individual psychology that deals with the inferiorities and superiorities on one hand, and also goals that cause inferiority feelings and lifestyles that deal with goals on the other hand. When we have here race reason that is concerned with abolishing the white privilege that affords superiority feelings to the white race and inferiority feelings to the non-whites. It should be noted that racism per se is based on the notion that a certain race is either superior or inferior to other races. Now that we've learned the methodology, let's dive into the analyses. I'd like to begin by showing you who are the main race traitors and why. We have Griffin from Black Like Me, Queenie and Hortense from Small Island, Frank or Furo from Blackass, and others are characters from the three texts. So starting with Griffin. Why is he a race traitor? Because he's a white man who traveled to the south side of the United States, changed his skin color using pills, sunlamp, and dye. He also jeopardized his peaceful life. He literally documented the differences between the white race and the black race, and he did so by drawing comparisons between the whites and the blacks and how each of the two races is affected either positively or negatively by the white privilege which he seeks to abolish. He reached a conclusion from what he experienced that as a white man, he did not find hardships because of his skin color. Quite the reverse. It helped him live his life without verbal or physical violence. As a black man, everything becomes overturned. Therefore, the actions of race reason made by John can be seen by his endeavors to unravel the bitter truth of his white peers against the black people. He exposed their racism, extreme views, violent approaches, and the list goes on. In the second work, Small Island, it is found that here exists more than one race traitor, but with a different strategy. Queenie is also white. She opens her house for the black soldiers and afterward black immigrants. She does not comply with the prevailing racist views of the English society. Color to her is of no importance, and for that reason, she does not wait for white tenants. She even has an affair with a black man. Queenie fights racism by using the white privileges she has, aiding among others a pair of Jamaican spouses, Gilbert and Hortense. Queenie, being white, is capable of helping the black soldiers and immigrants alike because her whiteness permits her to stand against her neighbors who do not agree on her decision of renting her rooms to the blacks, making it more of a place of freedom in England. So she helps the blacks suffer less in a prejudicial society. The second figure in the novel is Queenie's renter, Hortense, who shows contempt against her mother and grandmother, her mother for being a servant and her grandmother for being a slave, as if that old woman had an option in the past. She considers herself neither black nor Jamaican, yet white and British, only for having a slightly brighter skin tone than her Jamaican peers. So she betrays her race when she always brags about her education, work post, and the like in front of the Jamaicans, seeing them less in status. What about Furo? He changed his name from Furo Wariboko to Frank White. He also forgoes all of his family members to sustain his whiteness in his Nigerian community. He tries to get rid of the blackness of his buttocks by using creams. Thus, when he becomes white, instead of treating the black people around him in a way that he has desired others to treat him when being black, he treats them in an arrogant way, showing dominance, and started acting like a master against his slaves when dealing with them. Others include East and Leviton, John's colleagues in Black Like Me. Leviton has funded and published John's experiment in his magazine, while East serves as an ideal model of somebody being banished from his own community for challenging racial prejudice. Using his newsprint as a means to persuade the other white people to cast racism aside, East is obliged to live in seclusion on the fringes of society because he could not assimilate into the ideas of the white community. And we have Michael, a figure from Small Island, who is Hortense's cousin. Although the novel does not say much about him, but considering what he has done, he's also a race traitor. He makes affairs with white women, one of whom is Queenie herself, ignoring the love of Hortense for being black. He tells Queenie that he has nothing back in Jamaica, claiming his family is dead, so he forgoes all his past, family members, and country in favor of self-interest. In Blackass, the other black characters, the CEOs, the women, and the rest, involve themselves in betraying their own race by providing plenty of opportunities to Frank, preferring him over all the other blacks. Especially, it is shown that he has no skills or qualifications to earn their favoritism. Now that we have learned in what sense and how they are race traitors, let's move on deeper by looking at the works from a psychological standpoint. Now, why did Griffin do what he has done? Because of his personality type. He has a social personality, he has commitments toward the others, and he feels he has inferiorities that need to be compensated, and these inferiorities are related to his line of work. He wanted to answer the question of why the rate of the black Americans who are committing suicide is higher than the others. And he feels superior, but not in an arrogant sense. He believes he is truly considerate than his white-skinned peers, yet he does not feel superior to black people, and that's very, very important. Okay, now what about Queenie? Queenie suffered because of 4 tasks. The task of work, the task of love and sex, the task of friendship, and the task of family and parenting. Now let's see how she fixed them or how she dealt with them. For the task of work, she opened her house for the blacks after her aunt died and her husband went to war. And the task of love and sex, she had an affair with a Jamaican soldier because she married Bly out of vested interest, not love. And she also dealt with the task of friendship as she befriended Gilbert Joseph and his wife later on, for she had no friends. And she got pregnant from Michael and gave away her child to the Josephs as her relationship with her parents and husband was unstable. Now what about Hortense, her renter? Hortense has superiority feelings. She feels superior to her black counterparts. This results in due to her slightly brighter skin tone and her occupation of being a teacher in a foreign board school. Now, while work provided her superiority feelings back in Jamaica, it replaced these feelings with inferiority ones when she traveled to Britain because she could not find work. And she also suffered from the task of love and sex Being rejected by her cousin Michael, she fails at loving her husband Gilbert, whom she does not gratify his sexual needs. Now let's take a look at her husband, Gilbert. Gilbert has a leaning personality type. He shows signs of that personality, especially through his decision in getting married from Hortense due to her capability to pay for his ticket to England. And he suffers from low income as a truck driver and a beekeeper, and he recruits himself in the RAF. He does so for he wants money to enable himself to study law, but he couldn't eventually. He fails to deal with his wife in a good way at first, always saying things that hurt her, unleashing his anger on her, yet after a while, he becomes sympathetic toward her and supports her when in need. And finally, we have Fioro Wereboko, or Frank White. Well, in fact, he's neither Frank nor White. He's a liar and he's black. He has a leaning personality type, counting on others to overcome his problems, and it should be noted that those around Fioro built in him the sense of superiority, yet he embraces it, reaching a superiority complex. He starts rebuking others and disliking the things offered to him, and the only inferiority that is left when he is changed is his black buttocks. In conclusion, because of history, social constructs, colonization, slavery, blackness is associated with inferiority feelings, and whiteness is associated with superiority feelings. Also, white race traitors seek white privilege abolition, while black race traitors seek personal superiority. Now, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm happily ready now to answer all your questions and hear your comments. Thank you again.